I guess for me, it was really important to have the members of the band before the Supreme Court, because I wanted to be able to look in the eyes of the justices as we were making these arguments and as they were kind of pondering over the decision. Whether or not they recognized that it was us who was the band, I think some of them did, because like Justice Kagan kind of nodded at us and smiled. I just wanted to do that as a matter of principle. And walking into the room, it felt unreal. Like, first of all, I remember turning to one of my bandmates and I was like, it's smaller than I thought. At least the Federal Circuit had balcony seating. Like this is a pretty small room. But as we kind of sat down, it was just kind of a weird position to be in. Like I couldn't be anywhere near my attorneys. We were separated by rows of seats that were reserved for members of the court. And I thought that was kind of odd. Like, here's the guy who's supposed to be advocating for me, my voice, and I can't even sit near the guy to say anything at all. I just had to sit there. And then on top of that, they put me in the second row of the section too. And someone actually next to me kind of caught the attention of the court officials and say, hey, this is Tam. Like, the name of the case is Tam. Can he at least get a more prominent position or sit in the front row? They checked with the Solicitor General's office. They came back and said, sorry, we're reserving this row for somebody more important, or in case somebody more important shows up, was what they said, which is really funny because it remained empty for the entire time. So I was like, literally nobody is more important today. We sat actually near a group of law students as well, who actually said, the Supreme Court justices are like mythical creatures. You hear about them all the time, but they only come out in public every so often. And I just thought it was just a very weird environment to be in. And then once the oral arguments began, excuse me, it just felt unreal. Like, there was a room full of justices and attorneys all using my name, using the name of my band, and none of them knew our work. They didn't know who we were. They were just teasing out the most extreme cases in law and making some kind of horrendous accusations about who we were in our work, thinking that we were just pursuing this trademark for selfish reasons, that it wasn't about this larger principle of speech and fighting for our communities and representation. And I remember thinking, as they were coming up with these absurd scenarios and thinking, like, you guys weren't there. You weren't there when we were working with Asian American kids, thinking about taking their own lives, but that we were able to intervene because we had a story that resonated with them. They weren't there as we were planning for prisoners or on military bases and trying to represent our community as something that deserved attention, as that we were actually human beings and we were advocating for anti-racism work. They weren't there for that. They just wanted to kind of tease out these assumptions about who we were as a band, as Asian Americans, to prove their own respective perspectives on the law. It was only about halfway through the arguments that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg spoke up. And I'll never forget that moment, because the room goes quiet. And she says, doesn't it matter that everybody knows the slants are Asian? They're using the word to describe, not to disparage, and to remove the sting from the term. I mean, it was just so powerful. I was like, wow. Notorious RBG, she gets it. Like, she understands where we're coming from. She cut right through the heart of the matter. And the funny thing is that the only thing the Solicitor General had in response was to say, was, well, we found a lot of articles on the internet that suggested otherwise. But what he was talking about was urbandictionary.com. He was talking about the 2 white supremacist message boards that they quoted from. He wasn't talking about the voice of the Asian American community. He had nothing to back up that particular point, just assumptions and stereotypes about us. Still, I'll never forget that of all the justices, it was the great dissenter, that advocated for us, that stood up for us. And for me, that was the moment that things changed. I wasn't just watching this battle between legal minds that was completely unrelated to me, even though they're using my name. It was like at that moment, I was fully vested, that I was like, I hope they can see. I hope they can really understand where we're coming from. So I think that moment in the courtroom was probably the most profound to me. And it was like, I actually sat there thinking, it doesn't really matter what happens at this point. Like, she gets it, and I hope that view is contagious. That for me was the moment at the Supreme Court